Hello and welcome to the first panel today, which is the Marketing Toolkit: how translators can make their work matter. And before we get started on our panel and introduce anyone, I want to thank everyone for coming out this morning. I want to thank all of the sponsors, and especially Danny for setting this all up and helping organize the whole Literary Translation Center. It's very cool. This isn't like anything we have elsewhere. And it's nice to see so many people here, too. My name is Chad Post. I'm the director of Open Letter Books in Rochester, New York, and 3%, a website that focuses on international literature and translation and promoting it. And today we're going to talk mostly about how translators could help with the marketing process. Because as you probably know, most publishers complain about how hard it is to get your books out to readers, to find readers for our books. All of the normal or traditional ways in which you used to market things are kind of eroding, like book reviews, co-op possibilities, taking out ads. All these different things that publishers used to rely upon are sort of not the same as they used to be, not as powerful as they used to be. So we're all trying to find new ways to help promote the books, find the readers for the books. And this is especially important when it comes to literature and translation, which has a different sort of readership to begin with. And one of the things that we talk about today mostly is the role that the translator can take in helping promote this book and help find readers for their work, both during the beginning of the process and also after it comes out. So, to talk about this, we have, starting on my immediate right, Ira Silverberg, who's the literary director at the National Endowment for the Arts and is a former small press publisher and a agent for a number of years. To his right is Max Porter, who I keep referring to as Cole Porter, and almost did again, who is the commission,
so it's fun.
which is cool, right? Okay. Who is the commissioning editor at Granta Books and Portobello Books, and used to be an independent bookseller at Daunt Books here in London. And then on his right is Esther Allen. Oh, wait, no. Esther didn't make it yet. She's coming. But so Samantha Schnee is going to sit in. She's from Words Without Borders. And when Esther comes, Esther's a translator from French and from Spanish. She also teaches at Baruch in New York and is an overall translation advocate and knows everything. So I thought we'd start by just taking some introductory few minutes type of talk about what you think translators can do, should do, what works, what doesn't work, how to act. And we will start with you, Ira. Because you're right here.
Never be tardy. I mean that. Don't be tardy. People are counting on your translation. They've cataloged it. They're waiting for it. It's always be really honest with your publisher. But the thing I think that's changed in the past 5 years is that the translator has become an important part of promoting a book. That a translator's experience in terms of their relationship with the writer, their relationship with the text, their relationship with the culture they're translating from provides the publisher with the makings of what, and when Esther gets here, she'll talk about a toolkit, because Pen American Center has actually made a toolkit for translators to help publishers, which include a Q&A with the writer that you might do, a sense of where the book fits in culturally, questions a reviewer may want to ask. I think what we take for granted is that when books go out to reviewers, they are simply reviewed or not. But in the case of a translation, there's an opportunity to create a conversation around a book. Why is this book being translated into this other language? What is the backstory? Why is it culturally relevant? What is it about this book that makes it important to get into other languages? And there's a lot more to speak about. I also think that the translator's experience is part of the story too. Whether that gets worked into the media or not, we don't know. But I know when I was an editor, I counted on translators to bring books and ideas to me from other countries. I didn't count on agents or the agencies who represent countries. I counted on translators like Esther Allen. Here's Esther Allen. Hi! I would call Esther and ask, what do you think? What do you have? Who are the other translators I should talk to? We were talking about the toolkit. So at some point we're going to kind of move it over to you and just talk a little bit more about what translators can do to help to get the work out. But that's my little overview. And now, Cole, you want to sing?
Why don't we have Esther talk about
The
that?
rest of,
Yeah, have Esther talk about the marketer. Welcome. Hello, good morning.
Deer caught in headlights.
Yeah.
Tell us why you were late.
Exactly.
It's all the fault of the tube. It's not my fault.
Other people came from the same neighborhood you did, we are told.
No, Chad knows why I was late. I got locked inside Caroline's apartment, exactly as happened to you
The
once.
same thing. You got locked in.
Exactly.
Told
I got
you it's
locked
possible.
inside. I was like,
It's-
how do you
it's-
get locked inside someone's house? Now I know.
Yep. I've been there. Did you scale the wall?
No, we found another solution.
Ah.
Anyway, what can translators do to help publicize? Well, I think that it's very important as a translator. I think that there has been a misconception of a translator's role, which is that you're sort of a work-for-hire person. You're sitting at home next to the phone. You have certain language skills. And someone calls you up and says, will you translate this book for X number of dollars? And you say, okay. And then you go to your desk and translate and you send it in. That actually has been the way it worked, I think, for some people in past years. But the new sort of model of the translator that's evolving and that I think is a much better thing for everybody is as a sort of curatorial presence. You need to know what's being published in the languages you translate. You need to stay on top of the exciting new writers. In other words, you need to conceive of yourself. If you're in the publishing world, you would call yourself a scout. If you're in the academic world, as I am, I would call myself a curator of cultural contact. But essentially it amounts to the same thing. And you cultivate relations with publishers because by cultivating those relationships and by making yourself useful to publishers in the form of writing readers' reports and things like that, you can actually affect the translation of works that you think are important between cultures, which is something I think is tremendously important. And if you work in that way, what you'll find is the publisher has a very different view of you and it will kind of naturally come from that because you're the person who brought in the project, because you've been involved in making the project happen. It's perfectly natural to include you in the marketing of the book as well. And you'll know better than anybody. You'll be involved in translating rave reviews that have appeared in the home language that the publisher otherwise wouldn't have access to. You can assemble a publicity packet. You can probably describe the project better than anybody else, including the author himself, for the market that you've translated it for. And publishers are increasingly aware of that. I just saw something extraordinary this morning that a friend of mine sent me. She is the translator of Haruki Murakami. And his latest book, it cannot be had in Japan. It has sold 500,000 copies, and you literally cannot get it in a bookstore. She hasn't even seen it yet, okay? She translates Murakami into Polish, and she's started a website with the Norwegian translator of Murakami that is a global website for all the translators of Murakami about this book. And so there are contributors where they've already started researching the Liszt sonata that is the basis for the title, where the cover image came from, the obscure American artist. They've already started exchanging information and getting to work on this translation in public even before she's read the book. So it's kind of I don't know of too many other instances like that, but I think we'll see more and more of that kind of thing. And if you include the reader in the whole process of translating, and she was very nervous about it. Of course, all things are coming in all different languages. So she included like a translate button, and then she was like, we're translators and we're relying on this debased form of translation. But it permits a kind of, international conversation about the way in which this book is moving into all these different languages that includes fans. People who love to read Murakami can be engaged by this site. And I think it's an incredible way of, just not just getting the book out there, but getting what we do out there, which is equally important.
It's fantastic.
I have a couple of comments on that, but I want Max to talk first as a publisher and bookseller.
You two are very good. I have nothing to add. I slightly paraphrase what they're saying from the point of view of an indie bookseller and also a publisher. In both of those roles, I would say badger us, bring us ideas. As Emma from Penn said to me in an email, you are an activist for translation and for, more importantly, I think, and this is often forgotten, for the subject of the book. You will be, by the time you've translated the book, an expert in that on a level with the author, and therefore be as involved as you possibly can and milk the opportunities of social media and social networking and what websites can now do in every possible way. The there is the difficulty of being paid for things, which I think, nuts and bolts. There are things increasingly that newspapers can have translated themselves. Get in there and steal that work back off them, even if you're not being paid for it, so that you stay attached to the project and you stay attached to the subject as much as possible. I think there's also an important distinction between living and dead writers, and I think if you're a translator of a dead writer, this is a very different kettle of fish to the kind of activism side of being a translator. So we, at Granta, we publish. I published Joseph Roth, and Michael Hoffman is a model of how you can single-handedly rehabilitate the reputation of a writer through your translation efforts. And he, for example, brought to us the idea of doing a biography through letters, which he then did, which further contributed to the extraordinary readership that Joseph Roth now has in English. That is his hard work. We just published the books. That's an extreme example, but in sort of differing degrees, that's happening right across the board. That would be my opening thoughts, I think.
One thing that strikes me as we talk about this is that there's several layers of the marketing, or several different moments in which this happens. Like the first one being that when the translator brings the book to the publisher, that's sort of marketing it to the publisher as why they should pay attention to this. And you might be able to speak to this a bit as Granta and Portobello, but it seems like that's an essential moment, the initial essential moment, because for a publisher, or editor at any publishing house, for a lot of like American or English or written in English works, you sort of have a context for that, a much better context than you do for a book from Romania, when there are 4 other Romanian novels that have been translated in the past 10 years that you might have read, but come on, that's like 4 out of however many books that have come out in Romania. And so I feel like that, and maybe you can talk to us, like that, how that plays a role in the editorial process, because the translator has that opportunity to cast this author within the cultural net and within like the world literature sort of situation.
Yeah, and don't let the commission of the translation, the delivery of the final product, be the end of that. Let that be a discussion. So we are very fortunate in this country, and just off the top of my head, because he's so involved in English Pen, someone like Ollie Brock will come into our office and tell us there are writers we should be reading based on the taste and based on the things we've translated before. That constant, as you say, try and eradicate the importance of an agent wherever possible, because they're foul people.
I didn't say that.
and beam it out and try and cut that out, because you as Esther said, you can be scout, agent, freelance researcher. And the rewards, maybe it's a longer game. I think in some respects, play the longer game on behalf of the language you're translating and the culture you're trying to bring in.
Well, particularly because the editors are stupid,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So the translator has a responsibility to take the stupid editor, right, and kind of educate that person.
Yeah, stupid, lazy, ignorant.
That's right. Just so we could get that
so
straight.
Somewhere between evil agents and stupid editors, you exist as a kind of.
It's true. It really is.
Yeah. Actually, I have a question for you about that. Then, what sort of, when you represented, because you represented Grunberg and some other
foreign writers.
Foreign writers.
Evil agent that I was.
How did you deal with that situation, both in terms of like marketing that author, promoting them to a particular editor, or even because some of the times you couldn't read the books before you were.
I was very lucky in that when I worked with Arnon Grunberg, the Dutch Foundation for Literature was my partner in the endeavor, and they did interviews with the editor, they translated reviews, interviews with the writer, they translated reviews, they did sample chapters. We worked hand in hand, and it was great. The one time I worked with the Japan Foreign Rights Center, again, they were fantastic. They provided samples. When I've worked on behalf of publishers, the publishers have always commissioned samples. Only once did I ever have to go out with nothing, and that was when I worked on behalf of another agent who was probably stupid or evil. Stupid and evil, perhaps.
I think blended together. Yeah.
It was one of my closest friends. So she may be stupid, but she's not evil. But there too, what we were able to do was get a certain number of. Well, we didn't have translated pages of manuscripts. We were able to get translated reviews. I mean, I think you can't go out as an agent, as a translator, as any intermediary without backup.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to have more than a certain number of pages. No one's going to go in with a big chunk of pages unless it's a publisher who's just underwriting all of those costs. And the more pieces of that puzzle of who is this author, what is this book, how do I present it, the better. So the full range of interviews and reviews, good, bad, and otherwise, can be really helpful. Biographical information as it may pertain to the manuscript, context for how that book was written, why that writer might have been in such a place, what it was that got him or her interested in the topic of the novel. Creating a whole picture is actually more important with a work in translation than a work in the native language of the editor, who's just going to take a lot for granted in terms of cultural assumptions.
But also, I mean, from an editorial point of view, we're incredibly busy, and we're absolutely bombarded with things the whole time, and we might, for personal or professional reasons, want to publish more literature in translation. We have a very mundane process we have to get it through. We have an acquisitions process. Make it as easy as possible. Exactly what Ira is saying. Arm us with as much as you possibly can, because we have we have sales and marketing to convince that this Dutch novel is the right Dutch novel to bring. So tell us about Wumberg and where he came from and how he sells.
Even more stupid than you are.
They're colossally stupid people. Yeah.
Regarding that, an editor of my acquaintance, who's neither stupid nor evil, was talking about trying to sell a Turkish book to his marketing people, and they kept saying, "How can we buy a book that we can't read?" And he said, "What are you talking about? We buy books that haven't even been written yet all the time. This book exists. It's been written. It has an audience. It's proven. And you're thinking of this as more of a risk than us giving somebody a great deal of money to write a book that doesn't even exist yet?"
This is very true. And there is like two things that are going on there too. Like the initial, all the information that the agent, translator, author are providing to the editor to get the editor to put that through the acquisitions process. And then that second stage, even if it gets through that acquisitions process, which involves marketing and publicity for better or worse, then is getting those marketing and publicity people motivated to actually do something. And you have lots of stories. I know about a stupid publisher that published a book that was
A stupid book too?
No, it was a good book. It was a good book. The agent was good too. I don't think she's here. But we did this author at Delkey Archive and sold thousands of copies, like 5,000 copies. Then they took the book, of course, to a stupid publisher with a stupid situation. Ended up selling like 400 copies of her next book because no one in marketing was interested or cared or gave it any second thought, because they had all these other things. So how can the translator play a role in that moment for you? Is there anything else they could be doing aside from this initial giving you the information to help you convince you that this book is a good book? Is there anything that helps you as an editor going to the publicity and marketing people to get them motivated?
To acquire the book before the thing's even published?
After it's acquired, and now you're getting your sales and marketing team on board to actually
There's a lot of things really. I think it's a question of as we said before, suggest the translation of an interview he did with X 5 years ago, or digging out the Paris Review interview, or as you said, translating the reviews. I think also we should just say that in this country and in America, we are enormously fortunate to have organisations in place that for want of a better expression, lubricate this process. And I think translators, on the whole, are very good at calling on the help they can get, be it funding or support or panel discussions, and in the sense that you're sort of self-regenerating networkers all the time. The more you network, the more you get back. And I think just take that model into your relationship with an editor, a relationship with a publisher. Bombard them the whole time with thoughts and suggestions. Even, as I say, even if you're not going to get paid.
And translators know other translators who can be reviewers. Translators know people at the cultural institution of that country who people in the publishing house may not know. Translators, if they're very close to a particular language and the cultural institutes around that language, can bring a type of support to a project that publishers just don't have access to, because they're not part of the network of people supporting the entire culture around the book. So indeed, it's curation plus bridge building, and bringing the whole team across that bridge to say, okay, French Cultural Services can do X and Y and Z, and frequently publishers don't know what they can do. So your ambassadors and curators and bridge builders and so many things.
Well, and I want to say something in favor of working with people like Chad and you who understand this, because I think there is still a sector of the publishing industry, maybe larger commercial houses, what can I say, that still has this old view of the translator as like the person who mows the lawn, and they come, they mow the lawn, and we give them money and they leave. And so you still do have a battle to fight, and it's made me increasingly reluctant, actually, to work with the publishers that have that notion. I mean, I just was talking to Chad's class about, a big battle involving a book cover that simply completely misrepresented what a book was. And I kept saying, this doesn't have anything, you like the cover, but that's because you haven't read the book. And I had no voice in that situation. It was like, well, who are you? You're the guy who mows the lawn. Like, why do we care about what you think? And it made me think, from now on, I really would much prefer, maybe the money is slightly better with a bigger commercial house, but it's just so much better to work with the kinds of houses that we see represented here, where your contribution will be valued and you'll have a real voice in what happens with this book that you devote so much of your work and effort to.
So I think the main lesson so far, just to summarize, is that you can never underestimate the ignorance of everyone in publishing.
But also, nor should we give up on the big guns. And actually, sometimes it might fall to a translator to be the person that can say to a publisher not adept at publishing a certain type of translated fiction, do you know there are grants you can apply for? Do you know there are organisations that can give you money or put a sticker on the front of your book to explain that it's one and award, et cetera, et cetera. It's amazing I don't know how to say this without being rude. That there's a sort of thinking on the ground that independents have and smaller publishers have, that the case by case you work on a book and the nuances of that project, be it dead or alive or banned or censored or bestseller or destined to sell 400 copies. Means that you're all thinking in different ways, and that extends right from the acquisition through to the publicity of it. Bigger houses struggle because the communication is less good. So again, I'm reaching for the lubricated machine analogy. I don't know, totally wrong. All I've said is lubricated machine and agents are hateful. Don't minute me. Don't.
We'll remember all that.
Some of my best friends are agents.
We're being filmed. By the way, one other question about that, Esther, because you brought up the book, of which, can we say the name of the book? I mean, we're being filmed, but whatever. I mean, I'll say it.
Are you willing to get into detail?
Well, I'll get into the detail for you then. Okay, so the book in question is this Jose Manuel Prieto. It's a Cuban author. His third novel that's come out recently is called Encyclopedia of a Life in Russia, and we use it in my class. And the cover, it's a very interesting book because it's set up as an encyclopedia. So it's like all alphabetical. It's all these different entries. The plot sort of gets put together as you read through it, and you piece things together, and there's different references. It's very interesting, very polylinguistic sort of book. The cover is a red-haired girl with like a red box. It looks very much like a romancy sort of cover, like a 19th century romance book, which it's really not. I mean, there's the love story in this book is that a guy wants to find a girl to like take pictures of and to write a love story about, so putting her into like a sort of role. So it's not really your traditional like 19th century love story. And what's even better than this, so the cover is a little off-putting. It's not, everyone that I've talked to that is interested in the book has looked at it and been like, wow, that's no. But the best thing is that the first word of the jacket copy is misspelled, which is absolute like mind-blowing moment. So which leads to my next question. Has there been times, so that was a bad situation in a sense, have there been times that that publishers have involved you in that part of the process, post like all of your getting the information, translating things, like in the actual marketing part at that level or after that level?
An editor whom I adore, who is a brilliant, wonderful man, like everyone here today, Edwin Frank at New York Review of Books Classics, is publishing a novel that's written in 1956, but it's set in 1790. And I had the very curious idea of using a photograph taken in 1905 by an Italian anthropologist who went to the Gran Chaco in the north of Paraguay, which is where this book ends, and was actually murdered by the indigenous people. And the plates were located 5 years later. So this story of the dead photographer and the weird, eerie quality of this photograph that was taken and the guy was killed, and it's 1905, so all photography that's that early has this strange quality, seemed to me to fit perfectly with this book, even though it's set in 1790, so photography is obviously an anachronism, but the book trades in anachronism. And Edwin was thrilled, and it's the book cover.
I can hear eyes rolling in the production department. Oh, Translators got a photo we've got to use.
No, actually,
it sounds perfect,
the production department really likes the picture. It's a beautiful picture. It fits in beautifully with the book. And my name is on the cover, too. So one more
Translators'
reason.
names on covers, increasingly?
Well, sometimes people just say no, and if you're and I mean it's a particular problem in England. Actually, I have a friend who had stipulated in the contract that her name had to be on the cover because among American translators in particular, this is a huge issue, and so they put her name on the back cover. And she said, "I really think that anyone who said name on the cover would understand that to mean front cover. So next time you're writing that language, make sure it says front cover, not back cover."
Do you use that as a marketing tool for Portobello Granta, like the author, the translator, as a figure in addition to the author? Or can you do that, or is there?
You can do whatever you want. I mean, in the case of someone like Michael Hoffman, who I was discussing before, Joseph Roth's a slightly different thing because his name deserves to be on the front cover for many different reasons. But someone like Peter Stamm, who he also translates for us, we are trying to bring Peter Stamm to this country, trying to win him a new readership. We know we're dedicated to doing that, however long that takes us. We think Michael Hoffman will help with that. So his name's on the cover.
I just want to mention again Japan in this sense because Japan is very different when it comes to translation. It is a culture of translation. Its literary culture grows out of translation. And so a figure like Motoyuki Shibata, who is Japan's foremost translator of contemporary American literature, in Japan, all you need to know is that the book is translated by Motoyuki Shibata. You don't really even care who the writer is because you know Motoyuki Shibata, you know that it will be a superb translation, and you know it will be a book that you'll really like. And the other person who has that status in Japan is Haruki Murakami himself, who has translated 60 books. So, there is a way in which some places have a culture of translation in which the curatorial role of the translator is so prized that the translator's name itself becomes a kind of brand. And, we have that here as well. Michael Hoffman, Edith Grossman. It's a developing thing, but I think that it's important that it continue to develop for a whole lot of reasons.
There's a house in the U.S. called Archipelago who only do translations, and they've been sending their translators on tour. And what they've managed to do is work with libraries, different departments at universities, and actually create tours where the translator and the work of the translator becomes part of the discussion in a classroom and in a library. So it's great. It's not just about the book. It's about that person who's representing the book and that person's relationship to the book. And I think it makes the whole conversation around the book and translation that much more dynamic because there's a live representative. And they've done very nicely with it. It's not possible to do it with each and every translator. You really need to know how to set a tour like that up. It doesn't work in public spaces so much. It doesn't work in bookstores, but it works in particular communities like on a campus.
This so from your experience as a publisher agent and now at the NEA, one of the things I was going to ask you is about that sort of situation. Like, what things should a translator hold out, like offer to be able to do marketing-wise, publicity-wise? I'm going to sneeze in a second here.
Okay. Bless you.
Marketing-wise, publicity-wise, after the book is available. So being able to offer themselves up, I'm willing to go on a tour, here's the people I know. What other recommendations would you have at that very practical level?
It's a balancing act because publishers can also be incredibly defensive. And not necessarily embrace all of the ideas of a translator. Sometimes they're right not to. Sometimes they understand their market well enough to know that a particular book is only going to work because it's reviewed, not because someone is getting out there. I think everything should be discussed before a book is published. I think when a translator goes in after a book is published, generally it's too little too late.
Yeah.
The publishing community has normally made its determination of the success of that book within moments of its birth. And rare is the book that can actually get help a few weeks later, unless it's with a smaller independent house who understands that that translator can set up readings and conversations in universities, at libraries, can bring a second-tier review list, can bring the potential for interviews on radio, but all of that should really, really be done in advance, because once the books are in the stores, the whole idea is to get them out of the stores. When they've been sitting there too long, the only thing that's ever going to happen is that they're going to go back to the warehouse, because it's just a horrible business.
Well, and regarding that, this is another thing that I think I really, really value about the small independent presses and why I'd rather work with them. To digress, we went to the Freud Museum a couple of days ago, and there's this amazing letter from Leonard Woolf of the Hogarth Press, written to Sigmund Freud in the last 6 months of his life. He's just escaped from Vienna. He's dying of cancer. And Leonard Woolf of the Hogarth Press writes him this note that says, "We feel that the title would be better as just Moses. Many people in England are afraid of the word monotheism." Which is like my favorite thing I ever read, ever. But the point is, Moses and monotheism did not instantly jump to the top of the charts, obviously.
I should have put a naked babe on the cover. That
Exactly.
would have really done it.
But at the same time, it's a book
Moses.
that any publisher would be very happy to have on their list, because it's undoubtedly sold 10,000 copies, for the next 100 years, and will continue to do so. And who wouldn't want to have a book like that? And it was just kind of shocking to see this mentality already in the 30s, and from Leonard Woolf. But I think that one of the great things about the smaller publishers is that they don't need to see that the book leaps to the top of the bestseller list within the first 5 seconds, or they're going to drop it, which is really, the model, as Ira was saying. The book's success or failure happens within minutes of its publication. So if you're working with somebody who's outside of that model and who can conceive of the value of having a book that sells, that stays in print and sells a few thousand copies a year every year for many years to come, you're really much better off, I think, as a translator.
What are you, as a bookseller, as a former bookseller, do you have any comments or things to chime in on what a translator should?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we're living in a fascinating, in some respects terrifying, in some respects quite hopeful time as regards what will happen to your translation when it's printed and bound and shipped out. One of the more interesting things about the way that the chain bookstore, the principal chain bookstore in this country, is changing is how they deal with backlist. So if you've translated 3 Greek novels by a Greek novelist, there is a strong likelihood that those books will wither away and fall out of print. And the translator, I feel, with some certainty, can be a part of keeping that backlist alive. And that, I think, is basically by doing as many events as you possibly can and building relationships with booksellers, particularly indie booksellers who are in control of their own stock, because a good indie bookstore, and we still have an enormous number of them, are curatorial enterprises, much like a publisher. So you just need to find the bookseller who has an interest in Japanese literature, and you'll find extraordinary depth of stock, and there's no reason why your product shouldn't be in there. They just might not know what your product is. So it's your responsibility, I think, to say, gosh, I see you have an awful lot of Mishima, but you have no Shisako Endo, and they're still in print with Peter Owen, and they look a bit sad. The covers are a bit sad, and that will in turn help this extraordinary word of mouth thing that kind of happens. So suddenly they've got new jackets, and suddenly film rights sell, and suddenly some Paul McCartney tweets that actually it's his favourite book, and off you go. And that was just with, a conversation with a good indie.
Wait, you can get Paul McCartney to tweet about my book?
Yeah. That actually brings up for me like a long two-part sort of question here. One part of it is it's going to be audience interactive. How many of you guys know personally a reviewer that you think would want to review one of your translations? Like a handful. How many know a bookseller that you would go and push your book on and make sure that they display it in the front of their store? How come the rest of you don't know more of these people? Like, this is one of the things that's always astounded me as a publisher, is that everything runs on personal relationships in publishing up until the translator, up until that point. Because we have relationships with agents, relationships with other editors, other publishing houses, with our authors, with our translators, with our reviewers, with our booksellers. But the translator seems to be like the outlier on that, where like with an author, when you're doing an American author who's part of a literary scene, and be it in London or New York, and they're at different parties, they meet different people, people ask about what they're working on, they talk about their book, they know the booksellers that they buy from. Everyone sort of knows that figure. And then when you get to the translator, they have to be the stand-in for the author in some ways, because the author is usually not part of this scene. They're in Bulgaria or Romania or China. And that the translator, if they are part of the literary scene, or put them in, work their way in, infiltrate that scene, can be someone who's sort of functioning in that way, where they know different reviewers because they meet them at parties. They go to all the bookstores. They know which bookstores have different displays, which bookseller at which bookstore is the one who likes Spanish language translations, whatever it might be. And I feel like that's a really key role that a translator could play. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Well, just also to confirm that, in a best case scenario, you build that relationship with that bookseller. A good indie bookseller over the period of a year can sell the best part of an entire print run of a novel in translation. And we're talking, because these are books that aren't necessarily selling a huge number of copies anyway, that gets a publisher thinking, that was really incredibly impressive, an unexpected result for that small Spanish novel. We need to work with X again. And it seems bizarre in a publishing industry controlled by huge monopolistic giants, that such small efforts can pay dividends, but they really, really, really can. And actually, the indies now potentially stronger than ever. And I think that we perhaps need to talk about social networking a tiny bit.
So the second part of the question is going on to Amazon, as you may or not have been alluding to there, but going into like the realm of where a lot of books are sold, especially in the United States, because of the size of our country and because of the nature of that there's not that many bookstores in more remote locations. A lot of books are sold through online sources. Which involves a different sort of marketing, because it's not like you're walking to a store, seeing a book on display, and then buying it. You're hearing about it in other ways. What role do you think anyone, agents, translators, publishers, can play in helping market a translation to an audience that's not physically there in the same sense, like doing more social networking, media things? You guys all look terrified.
I mean, I think it's the same job that you're doing. You're providing a publisher with a list of translators who they can email to. You're figuring out which websites, whether it's a translation organization or a culturally specific organization, book should be sent to. I mean, it's publicity and marketing, whether it's online or whether it's offline. It's all the same. It's just that we're doing more of it. I mean, I think, publicity and marketing under any circumstances. I think when you get into retail, there's nothing you can do. I really don't think there's a thing you can do to affect how a physical store displays, or how an online store displays, because that's all money determined by the publisher. That's all co-op money. But I think that all of these efforts to make a book visible on the web, by understanding keywords, by understanding search engine optimization, by treating the book as a product that will be found by certain communities and coding it so it can be found by certain communities, it's a skill we're all learning and understanding.
So that's exactly what is thinking, like the optimization, like making it visible. What specific things could a translator do to help with that situation?
Well, I know Susan Bernofsky has that great blog, Translationista, where she talks about translation issues. And there are a number of translators. I know the guy who translates Stieg Larsson has his own blog as well. His name is escaping me now. So there are translators who blog about their work. Myself, I don't have I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to those things. I don't even have a Facebook page.
I don't know.
But I do. What I tend to do to support my books is public programs. You know, I'll meet with classes. Because I'm an academic, it's just natural for me to support them in the academic community and talk. As I talked to Chad's class earlier, I went up to Boston University. So that's the way I do it. But I am very impressed by people who are making use of the internet in certain ways, and I do feel like I should start acquiring those skills. It's just there are only 24 hours in the day. You know.
We're sort of talking up a vision of the translator as this extraordinary sort of self-pimping superhero, which I think is absolutely right, and that's the predominant message we want to convey, I think. Or is there also, just to play devil's advocate, is there also something to be said for a translator who mows the lawn and slinks away back into the shadows of the mysterious world of translation and doesn't need to do anything other than become the translator of a certain type of Nordic crime and then build that relationship with that publisher and deliver, perhaps not, I don't know, but I know a certain type of publisher who just works very hard on the type of books they do, and because they do it so well, that publisher gives them the next 15 books in the series, and they don't even have a Facebook page.
Well, no one has seen a photograph of Thomas Pynchon, ever. So, there are people in the literary world who just choose not to have a public persona, and we have to respect that. There are writers who do that, and obviously there can be translators who do that. Most of the translators that I've known have been sort of embittered about their exclusion from the public forum. So, but at the same time, they probably would not feel at all comfortable with the idea of being the self-pimping superhero that you so beautifully described. So, I think there's some sort of, if you're the most self-promoting person in the world, chances are you're not going to become a translator, because a translator is actually, it's just true.
You'll become a poet.
I used to think, when I worked with the Penn Translation Committee, I used to think I need to get Merck to develop like an injection that you can give to translators so they'll start going, me, my name, me, because there's just something about, it's a very generous act, and people who do it don't tend to be people who just foreground themselves all the time, which is nice, which makes it a really nice community. But also, they'll accept things that other classes of people, other types of people, probably wouldn't accept.
Like every self-published author on my Facebook wall. Yeah.
I also think if you're translating a very commercial book, you don't need to be part.
Yeah.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah. I think if you're, I really think what we're speaking to is literary translation. Books which need as much help as possible in terms of finding an audience, things you just can't take for granted. So the commercial doesn't fit into this, or certain specifics don't fit into this.
I would have thought that, but that's why I brought up the project that Anna Elliott, Murakami's translator into Polish, is doing, because that's a hyper-commercial book. It's like the most commercial book on the globe right now, and she's using the interest in that book to create this international forum that is really about translation and draw people into that process. Yeah. So what she's publicizing there isn't the book per se, because the book doesn't need any more publicity than it already has. It's really drawing people into how this amazing global creature extends its 50 tentacles through the languages of the world.
Yeah. I was thinking, this time I won't name names, but the reason I brought up some of that stuff, then we'll open this up to questions, is that there are various translators that I had discussions with last night even, that were talking about a book that they really loved that didn't get the impact that it had. And so I think it's those kind of books that we're talking about, the situation where it's not Murakami or whomever, but you feel like you love this thing and you want this thing to get out there. Is there anything else you can help do to make that happen? Because relying exclusively on the publishing system as it is hit or miss. It really depends.
It's a case-by-case thing. Sometimes you don't need to be, badgering your publisher to publicize the book because it's going to sell itself and all that kind of thing. Like the actress who thanked Victor Hugo in her acceptance speech, like, dedicated to you. He's dead. He doesn't care. He's never heard of you. So that's misplaced.
Yeah, exactly.
On her part.
One of the most mysterious things I ever heard the head of a giant publishing house say, it was a panel on translation, and this person is a translator and the head of a giant publishing house, which probably tells many people here who he is. And he had a very big best-selling translated book that year, too, which made what he said particularly interesting to me. He said, the thing about a translated book is you never really know whether it's going to sell or not. Which at the time I thought, well, that's idiotic because you never really know whether any book is going to sell or not. But then the more I learn about bestsellerdom and about publishing and marketing, it seems as if the bestsellers are known. You know that a book is going to be a bestseller because you have put so much money into marketing that book that you know there is going to be a return on that investment. So that's the only way in which I can really make sense of, saying you never know if a book is selling or not and limiting that statement to translation. I think for books originally commissioned in English, publishers do know, people at the book fair right now do know what next year's bestsellers will be with a pretty high degree of certainty.
The phrase you use there, a return on the investment, I think is a great kind of one-line encapsulation of what we've been trying to say about this, is that the efforts you make will have surprising returns at unexpected points on your individual book or history, I think.
So, what questions do you guys have? I think, is there a microphone or something that we're supposed to use? Okay, bring it up. Ron?
Will Cole sing at the end?
Hi.
Yeah, Cole will sing.
What value have you seen from websites like Goodreads or even reviews on Amazon? Like, has that had an impact on sales? Do you sort of look at that?
Yeah. We'll take anything. Good. I mean, this is probably a point we should have made straight away as a translator. Do as much of the Goodreads, Kobo. I don't even really know what Kobo is, but you can go on it, can't you? And any of those sort of things that are like Spotify for books, where you can go on and rate things and talk about things and link things. It's basically the algorithmic power of Amazon can be recreated by an individual by blogging about certain things and putting links into certain things. I would have said the more of that you can do, absolutely.
Hi, I'm just translating a book which is going to be self-published on Amazon. So one of the things that I've done to plug it is I've set up a Pinterest board with pictures of things from the book, some things to show. It's a thriller, so there's lots of bangs and explosions and stuff, and pictures of cops and the FBI. But then there's pictures of, it mentions a bird called a great-tailed grackle, which I'd never heard of, so I stuck a picture of a great-tailed grackle on my Pinterest board. And I think there's loads of stuff in the commercial translation world, because I also do commercial translation. There's tons and tons of stuff out there about SEO and getting yourself a web presence. If we venture into that side of things, there's so much advice out there. We can find it and then we can harness it and use it for literary stuff as well.
Questions, Lawrence, in the way back.
If I could just ask a question about shorter form, either short stories or poetry. I mean, I know that for most of the magazines, at least in the US, the burden is on the translator to get the rights from whoever do the translation and then market them to the magazines. And I wonder also whether it's useful to, let's say, try and use short stories by an author whose book you've published and try and market those as well to magazines to choose. So I guess two parts of the question.
Well, it's a great idea, because if there's a novel coming out and you have access to short stories that you can place in journals or online to help support the work of the writer, that's great.
And I think to add to that, know these people's taste. So the editor of a magazine, don't waste the submission on something that isn't right for them. So particular poetry editors of various magazines in this country have really quite firm tastes, and they know what they like, and they know what they want to publish, and they know what length they want to publish. And if they publish something in translation, they like having parallel text, all that stuff. So don't waste the submission when it's not right. But when it is right, it's like approaching an agent saying, because you represent X, I think you'll like my work. If that's not true, you've blown it. If it's true, you stand an incredibly good chance of of getting their attention. So I think the same kind of sort of accuracy of approach.
It's interesting. We have a short story collection that's coming out next year, in which the translator Elizabeth Harris not only gave us the jacket copy, translated all the blurbs that we needed from like Pasolini and other people, the Italian, this Italian writer had been praised by, but also placed in magazines every single story from the collection but one. So it's appeared everywhere, all thanks to her. Like, we've done nothing yet for this book because it's still. What's that? Some of them were before, some of them were after. It was both sides. She just kept going. We finally we went to submit it to 2 lines, and she's like, "There's only one story left. You can send this one. Like, I've taken care of everything else." So yeah, the project came from the translator, and we got it through her. Yeah. Other questions?
Hello. My name is R.A.M. Verma. I am from India. I'm a translator. Recently, my book has been translated and published. The name of the title is Cricket Indo, the story of an Indo-Pak one-day cricket turf war, published by Strategic Book Publishing, Houston. So, whether I can introduce my book here for... Can I introduce my book here for... Can you give me some time? 5 minutes to introduce my...
We didn't hear all of what... What's the question?
He wants 5 minutes to talk about his book.
No.
Okay. You didn't understand?
No, but many of these people will be milling about afterwards. It's just not a forum for people to pitch. Because if we allow one person to do that,
that's right.
look at all the people around. It's just unfair to everyone else. But there are many people you can talk to afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much.
That question is back.
Hello, I'm Christine McSweeney. Hello, Max.
She's a brilliant case study of somebody who's... was it your first translation? First translation, absolutely extraordinary bit of work, entirely because of your... I'm just going to flatter you. A sort of 360-degree engagement with the text and with the writer. You sort of immersed yourself in the culture of the book you were translating, right up to music and food, and then that meant when we brought the author over, the discussion you had with her, one of which I was privileged enough to see, was one of the most vibrant discussions about prose and what it means to translate. Anyway, what's your question?
Yeah, which book was this? Which book was it?
This is Valeria Luiselli, by the way, is the author. I strongly recommend it.
And you were
Your energy is so strong that it's just...
She's got a very quiet voice. You have to just bear with her.
Yeah, you did put my...
Can't hear you, sorry, it's gone again.
There? Yeah. Okay, you did put my biographical details right at the front of the book and my name on the back cover too.
Back cover. Shame.
What I was thinking about, what I wanted to ask, I'm kind of on a one-woman quest about decentralizing literature in a way, or how it gets marketed, because, sort of as a translator, it is a problem for me sometimes that everything is in London. I'm in Norwich. And in Norwich as well, we have independent bookstores, but we're lucky if maybe once a year we find, an author in translation coming, doing signings and things like that. So outside London and the literary festivals in Britain, you're really not getting that marketing, so people are not getting to know about the books and that.
I mean, there are lots of reasons for that, I think, and it's an actual problem. Just slightly defensively, as an ex-events person from a book, I sweat blood to do interesting events. Two translators who are probably here talking about their new translations of Le Petit Prince. One of the most fascinating events I ever had. They're just no one bought a ticket because everyone wants to come and see William Boyd. I love William Boyd. It's fine, but the fault lies with the reading public in some respects. I know there are enormous efforts being made to market it. I think sometimes people need to go to more interesting events. and we can all jointly help them with that. Yeah, university departments. Yeah.
Well, look at all the people that are here. I mean, I'm kind of stunned by that. When I've spoken at translators centers at the Frankfurt Book Fair, there's 15 or 20 people. There's a handful of people. People are sort of drifting in and out. The kind of focus and attention and concentration and crowd that's been here for every event I've done here is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it.
I think that in this country at the moment we're living in a golden age. I guess it's the same with you guys. 10 years ago it would have been inconceivable what organisations and opportunities there are for talking about translation in public. BCLT, English Pen, Words Without Borders.
Well, I will say, though, that 10 years ago I did an event where I had 6 translators of Don Quixote into 6 different languages. It was at the Instituto Cervantes in New York. And it was a beautiful spring day. It was like the first day of spring, and it was on a Sunday afternoon. I thought, nobody's going to come. And there were 150 people there. They were turning people away. And it was one of the most fascinating conversations I've ever heard.
Okay, we're running short on time, but we have 2 questions left. You guys ask quickly.
Hello? It's on? Okay, I was just wondering, you're saying all these things that you can do as a translator. You can maybe place short stories or extracts in magazines and stuff. But how much would you say you need to not exactly get permission from the publisher, but keep the publisher up to date with what you're doing? Because I mean, like with the rights and stuff, if they've placed all the short stories that are going to be collected together in this book, or if you've approached a bookstore and said, how would you feel about doing an event? And they've said yes, and then the publisher goes, I didn't know you were doing that event. I have this whole marketing scheme planned out, and that's definitely not in it.
Yeah, I think you should
what
stay
would
in
you
touch.
say?
I think you should definitely stay in touch with your publisher or editor, and a lot of that stuff can be worked out pretty easily.
It has to be a collaboration.
Yeah.
If it's not a collaboration, it's not going to work. If people go rogue, only go rogue after they failed you.
Yeah.
That's superb advice.
You will piss publishers off occasionally by going rogue too early.
Really, yeah.
It's a proper danger, actually, because we're so busy, and the publicity, we have, well, at least some publishers have these quite well-honed processes they go through, and a translator can muddle around in that, and it can be counterproductive.
Hi guys, so I'm part of a Chinese to English translation community called Paper Republic, and we are all based in Beijing, and I'm also live in London. When I meet editors in London, I find it difficult to convey the kind of literature that they might want from me, and I see them so seldom. I'm here because of visiting my family who live in London. So my question is, if I don't see these people at all, and I'm very, very segregated, all my translator friends are, British or American, but they all live in Beijing, how do I sort of not mess up my relationship with the editor, because I don't really know what they want, and I send pictures that are sort of out of left field, if you see what I mean.
All yours. I'm a moderator.
I didn't entirely get that question, but I'm going to try to distill it into, you're looking to make connections with the publishing scene here based on translations of work from Chinese to English from the community in Beijing. Is that correct?
Working. Okay. So no, I'm not a author. I'm a translator, and all my friends are Chinese to English translators, native in English, know the language either because they grew up in 2 cultures or they're American or British in Beijing. So we all have contacts in America and London, but we never see them face to face, if you know what I mean.
I think I can take the question. I met Eric Abrahamson in Sydney a couple of years ago, and Paper Republic is doing amazing things. As a translator, you just have to read and read and read and read and read. You have to read a lot of Chinese to know what's out there in Chinese literature. You have to read a lot of English to know what people are publishing. Yes. That's how you'll know. You'll read their books. You'll read the magazine to see what kind of poetry is publishing. There's no shortcut. There's no way to know what they're interested in. in without reading what they're doing.
I guess I realize that, but that so few journals, for example, Granta in the UK, they don't publish Chinese fiction.
Start your own journal.
I
Start it online.
Paper Republic does have a journal called
Yeah,
Public,
I mean, that's
we're based in Beijing.
That's the future, though. The only way to get your voice heard is actually, it's not. I mean, it's historically, this is what marginalized communities have done. They've started their own journals. They get attention for it. It's what brings attention to them. And I think it's so easy to start something online, do an app, make it happen, and then bring people toward that.
Well, and also, I think the very best way to approach somebody, you can say to Granta, look, we've noticed that your list is really thin with contemporary Chinese authors, but we have this superb author, and we think he would have fit in really well with this or this issue that we admired a great deal, and you did publish a Vietnamese author in that issue. And so if you can just show people that you're really watching what they're doing, and you're really appreciative of what they're doing, you can start a dialogue, and there's no telling where that will lead.
Okay, I've got thank you. Thanks to everyone participating. There's going to be a panel in half an hour on innovations in literary translation, and then after that there's a networking lunch that I'm supposed to plug there's a game that's going to be played called Word Keys, a 4D translation game, which apparently is super fun. So stick around for those two things, and thanks to all of you guys for being on the panel today, and everyone for coming out.